told your friend you're not okay, and tell me what's wrong and why you never said you felt that way.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for liking, sharing, and subscribing. Today I'm creating a video by request, and I think maybe I should have talked about this in one of my other public videos, but there's so much things that I want to do that I can't make it all happen at once. But I'm creating this video now for you guys today. Here, I didn't even see that my shirt is not proper. Apology for that. So this video is for Scott or Brenda or whatever person is behind this account. Thank you guys for asking me. I love questions like that. I love interesting questions that I can make those videos for you. Things that sometimes I don't think about but are really important. And one of those topics is site translations. So I prepared a small script about the things that I think are so important, or the most important things that you as a medical interpreter should know and should be like familiar with in order to pass this test of site translations. I haven't had I had a site translation for legal, but I haven't had a site translation for medical. But it happened to me to have to do quite a lot of those site translations, so I feel like I learn by doing, as they call it in management field. Learning by doing, learning by experience in this case. The number one thing that I want to manage here before I start with which things that you should know with the shut eyes in order to pass this test, but not only to pass the test, in order to be able to perform this work in the hospital in person, because when you go to the hospital in person, a lot of the times in the emergency rooms, your phone wouldn't have service and you would not have time to check terminology. You would not have ability because your Wi-Fi wouldn't work. In some clinics it does work. The newest one, they do have a clinic Wi-Fi, but most of the times it's not very appropriate in person to do that. It doesn't look professional, and I would tell you maybe one time in the last 7 years or twice I check a word when I was in person. There is no time, it's not quiet, okay to just stop and all the people staring at you waiting for you because you have a gap of knowledge. So said that, I mentioned that because the number one thing that I want you to know, and I would advise you to go, and there is this folder, I'm gonna link it here, for medical terminology. This is 326. I'm gonna link up this folder that includes different medical terminology in English only. You could see them clicking on that folder. So whatever is your target language, the moment that you hear the word, you should know it in the other language. If it's Spanish, I'm just guessing by the name that you speak Spanish, you should be able to, the moment you hear it, it should come 1, 2, 3, you should have it in your head. If you have to think longer, it means that you need to work on your medical terminology. The reason why I address you to study those terminologies is because a lot of those forms include, I don't want to say all of them, but depends on what type of procedures, they include those terminology. And some rare cases, but it happens to me, one of these questionnaires that ask for different disease, they include all 9 body system terminologies. And I'm talking about disease that you don't work with every day, but you should know what they mean. So maybe in those videos I include the most common terminology, but in those forms on the site translations, you will have less common terminology that you need to know, that you must to know in order to do the job like well, proficiently, professionally. So I advise you to study medical terminology. You would need them, believe it or not. The site translation at the test are never the ones that you have at work. And also another thing, you never know what kind of sign. Sometimes it's a letter, sometimes it's some suggestion from someone, sometimes it's a form, a consent form. And now I'm gonna go all over those, the most common procedures. And I would advise you something that I did when I was preparing, not only to know those, because there is online forms that you can find which are very similar to the ones that you're gonna do in the hospital or during your test. Of course, nobody can reveal you the test information. We don't know, especially the national certifications. It's forbidden to divulge the material of the test or any questions or anything like that. So the truth is that even if you do it and you remember some question, it's not quite okay to publish those. Although most of those organizations, not most, but I will tell you the MBCMI that I'm trying to do right now, they do have a very detailed information about what the test will include, practices, protocols, what portion of the test, how much percent will be. So I really, really enjoy their information. But said that, you would not have the exact, like, oh, we're gonna give you a biopsy consent form for your test, just be ready. The reason why you're not gonna know, because there are many forms and you should be able to perform your profession. I think it's between 80 and 85% of proficiency, independently of what kind of form happened, because you may learn the biopsy, but then not even know what is endoscopy. So saying that, the reason why the test is structured like that is because they measure overall your vast knowledge and your vast ability to do this on a different levels, on a different topics. That's why these tests are so difficult. So I'm gonna give you a different consent forms that I advise you to read and to site translate as a type of exercise. I do understand that you are not probably able to afford the training one-on-one. So this material I personally did exercise to do those. And if I didn't know a word, I exercised to know the word, and so on. So number one, site translations that you have will be related to procedures. And the number one procedure is surgery. So there are different procedures in different fields, but I will advise you to do the surgery, the tooth extractions, consent form for tooth extractions, and stent. Stent is a cardiology. So they're very common. Then I advise you to check biopsy, colonoscopy, and upper endoscopy. I will talk about, so check the forms for consents, then CAT scan, CT scan, MRI, results of a blood test, or scanner results. This is classical consent. Now, the CAT, all these scanners and MRIs, I ask you to do to check the consent forms. The reason why is because they included the risks for the procedures. Okay, so I'm just giving you this right now, and I'm gonna go, because all of those forms have structure. So what about is this consent form? Then I'm just gonna go through the structure, more or less how those medical documents are structured, so you would understand how this thing work. So the number one is so-called informed consent form, and this is the consent for all of this procedure. All is classical. You gotta know what's consent form. informing you, and in order for you to decide, you give consent for surgery for the procedure, risks, and if you have opportunity to ask questions. This is classical structure. You cannot miss those. So just remember the structure of those documents. The number two thing that is discussed during or before, and is also included in those forms, and I will advise you to know on memory, is the part that they talk about the anesthesia, if it's partial, if it's full, and then the conversation with anesthesiologists, which includes the risk, the benefits, and eventual allergies. The number three thing that is including is the blood transfusion in case of emergency, or transfusion of a blood in case of necessity. This also, there is a consent form for blood transfusion, consent form for anesthesia. I advise you not to just know them, to know them on memory with shut eyes, because they're classical and you would need those, not only for the test, but when you work. The risks of the surgeries, and this includes symptoms of anesthesia, allergic reaction to anesthesia or anesthetic products, because some people end up in the emergency room because the anesthesia gives them anaphylactic shock. So I'm just gonna give you idea of what is that about. And then the risk of a blood transfusion, you should also know on memory. There could be infections, HIV, hepatitis, reaction to the blood products, and the body to refuse to accept this blood or blood products, and they have different complications. All these risks of the procedure, of the anesthesia, of the consent form, have a different side effects. Usually the doctors evaluate that the risk is worth taking, but you should know those because you would need them to interpret in a daily basis in the clinic. The most common risks of the surgery or any procedure are bleeding, blood clots, perforation of nearby organs, and injury of nearby organs. Any kind of procedure, I will ask surgery. It could be heart, it could be stent, it could be C-section, any kind of vasectomies or hysterectomies. Just know a lot of those. I will tell you, I personally find those forms and I write it down in 6 languages. So for me, after the second language, I would know the form in memory in English. And yes, in some languages, sometimes I still have to check some words because your brain is not always like blinking green line, but it's okay. Another part that I want to tell you about the anesthesia, and also I advise you to check some dental procedure. The reason why is because sometimes they have to do something called intubation. Intubation is when they put the breathing tube during the anesthesia to make the people breathe more easily. The tube goes through the throat and go to the bronchial trach to the lungs. Sometimes when they place those tubes or remove it, they fracture some teeth. So usually they will ask the patients to remove their prostheses if they have teeth that are moving or shaking in the mouth. The reason why is because of if they broke something, somebody have to pay it. The second part that is a big thing about anesthesia is so-called aspiration, or sometimes happens to go fluid in the lungs. There is a risk of that. Sometimes they include it in detail, sometimes no. Some of them talk about the heart rate. And malignant hypothermia is when your body temperature drops during anesthesia due to some specific reaction to some anesthetic products, and this causes you to go to hypothermia, or some type of reaction to anesthesia, which is this reaction to shake like this and to freeze. Clearly, it could be deadly or very dangerous. So, said that, I give you this most important because you have to know those. You must know them. and you don't have to worry, you don't have to be challenged with all those things that I just mentioned. It gotta be something normal to you. You gotta know them. The number fourth, I put risks of surgery, risk of anesthesia, risk of bleeding or allergic reaction. They could be dead during the procedure. They sign that. You should know all these terms. And infections. Every procedure have risk of infections, and this is something usually that happens in the site translation. More easy documents is to fill the questionnaire for your health, if it's OBGYN regarding your sexual health. If it's another body like cardiology will be heart, if it's lung will be if you have a COPD and lung infections, or if it's a brain tumor and stroke will be related to the brain and memory and all that. So they're all different in the base of which body system we're talking about. But all of these procedures have risk of infections. Normally, they inform them that you're gonna take antibiotics before the procedure to prevent in case infection occur. You may have to take antibiotics longer. And some of them can have numbness, tingling, scarring, swelling, bruising, some problems with the incisions, even scarring of the liver is common. You should know all of these things. But this is the most common things that are included in the consent form for procedure. So the procedure and anesthetic, risks, and blood transfusion and risks of death, and any other kind of risk that this include, and symptoms. So that's why terminology is so important. If you lack on medical terminology, site translation will be really challenging for you. And then said that there is another part that very common is included in those tests. This is the Hippa. Consent to share information, consent to disclose information, consent to withdraw scans, tests, just a consent form in general, and Hippa rule, just Hippa in general. And the other part, when they sign those and you do it at work, is so-called electronic signature. So there is a consent for electronic or telephonic signature. I advise you, I don't want to say memorize them, but just be very, very familiar with those. And the reason why I will explain you now. The reason why is because when you have a test and they give you a piece of paper like that, let's say normally it's a half page of a Word document that you have to do site translation with. And in legal, they give you 3 minutes to read it, or few. So normally it depends how long is the test, but usually they give you 2 to 3 minutes to read it, and then you have 2 to 3 minutes for the so-called process of a rendition. So the rendition is that how to say, the style of rendition. I'm just gonna talk a little bit how they evaluate the site translation, whoever is gonna do this for you. So first of all, the tone of your voice is very important, to be soothing and calm, no high pitches, no too low pitches, because whoever works with you want to clear it like clearly, and you don't have to be sophisticated. And if you don't remember a term, you can explain the meaning. Just remember, because you, once again, you have to interpret the meaning of this document. You do not write it, and it doesn't have to be precise if you don't remember some terminology. For example, let's say you don't remember what is colonoscopy. You can say it's a we're going to do procedure with which we're gonna check your colon using a small tube with a light and a camera in the end. Yes, I am aware that this technically doesn't mean the same thing. It's not the same term, you didn't use it, but you're not gonna lose points for forgetting the word on the target language. The trick number 2, you can use the original language word if you don't know it. For example, I don't know colonoscopy, and I will be doing, okay, I suppose you're Latina, so I'm gonna imagine I speak terrible Spanish, but I'm just gonna give it a try. Ok, ora esto è un documento di consentire la procedura di colonoscopy. You don't know the word, you put it in the original word. So this is another trick, which to me the examiner showed me that you see the word, that you acknowledge it, but for some reason you left it on the target language, which will mean also that you did not know the word, but would mean that you did not omit the word. So in the testing, it's very important, guys, to think for whoever is going to test you, to show that you acknowledge that this word exists. Because if you say, oh, ok, ora è un documento per consentire la procedura, e punto, and then you stop, you omit the most important thing, that is colonoscopy procedure. So having in mind how the testing is structured, there is a keywords test. So it doesn't matter how you're gonna say it. Let's say this is a consent form for colonoscopy procedure, for a procedure called colonoscopy. Let's say this is the consent form phrase and you want to say translate it. If you say, ok, questo è un documento per permettere la procedura di, and you don't know colonoscopy. If you omit colonoscopy, you fail this phrase completely. If you don't know it, say it on the target language, because this is your keyword, and this is one of the type of the test. It's called the bullet keywords. These words, if you use it in the target language of the translation, of the site translation or interpretation, whatever you want to call it, you pass the test because you didn't miss this word. But if you say, oh, this is just a form for a consent for procedure or surgery, and you omit what is the procedure or surgery, this completely changed the entire meaning. It could be heart surgery, it could be stent placement, it could be colonoscopy or biopsy. But if you miss those keywords, which usually are medical terminology and have very specific meanings, you fail. And the reason why you fail is not that you don't know the language, that you don't understand the structure of the test and what is evaluated. So this is why, once again, I repeat, medical terminology is fundamental to pass the site translation. The number two thing is the legal structure, the legal structures that I taught about, electronic signature, the Hippa, and all these things that I discussed below. But so number one is the meaning. I will say these two type of very important scores. If you catch the meaning and if you catch the keywords, the most important thing. Let's say that your document says, I was walking while a blue car hit me and broke my leg, and then I lose consciousness. Let's imagine this is the phrase, no? And you have to site translate, and you said, okay, I was walking and yo estaba caminando and un car hit me and you pierde conscienza. Let's say that you omit. So I was walking, keywords, blue car hit me, break my leg, number two, number three, lose consciousness. So whatever you use it in the target language, if it's Spanish, just remember that the structure is factual knowledge. Car, blue. Hit me and break what? Break my leg. If it says left leg, right leg, whatever is the part of the body. And then number three happen, I lose consciousness. Whatever you do, if you miss one of these things, you are failing this very important part of the test. This talking about the testing. But let's say that we managed to understand all the information and we managed to be able to express it in the target language. Let's say this is Spanish or whatever other language we guys do. We are good at that, which will include that we know the medical terminology, that we know we are accurate. Accurate is not omitting or adding. For example, addition will be, oh yes, I was walking. Let's say the phrase is this: I was walking and a car hit me and I break my leg and I was not feeling so well. So, stavo camminando quando una macchina, I don't know how is hit me in Spanish, hit me, e rompí il mio pierna, and mi stavo sentendo muy malo. And then you said, mi sentivo muy malo nella cabeza. Cabeza is addition. I was feeling very bad in the head, but the original speaker didn't say had, it said generally feeling unwell. So when you do this, you add. The previous sample that I gave you was with omission, missing a word, and it usually is a K word. Additioning is also penalized very badly, so make sure do not add anything. And of course, as the number 3 is the medical terminology. And the number 4 and 5, it's called style of rendition and flow. So style of rendition is how you render this text. For example, I have I'm just gonna show you. I have this certification here. I'm just gonna read it for you. So I will read it for you in Italian. This document is in English. Stato di sicurezza e garanzia. E questo è un certificato di compilazione dedicato a Miss Ioana Todorova perché ha compilato con successo il training della area di Jefferson County. È un training di cibo e di salute, come lavorare con i cibi. Questo certificato è stato verificato online tramite il numero E730B I494HQ8. E questo certificato è stato compilato in data 30 di giugno del 2019. Il numero di compleanno di Miss Ioana Todorova è agosto dell'84 e questo certificato è stato compilato nel Jefferson County della Organizzazione Salute Pubblica. Il direttore che ha firmato questo certificato è Brian Champa e questa è un'organizzazione che si chiama State Food Safety. Okay, I did not read this certificate before I saw it translated in Italian, and I was having pauses there, like small bumps. Although I didn't read it, I would still pass the test because there was some kind of a fluency in what I was narrowing. It was understandable for whoever would listen it into Italian language. But your style of rendition is like this easiness of rendering the document without very long pauses, without a lot of So your style also requires the flows, but if you really want to read this certificate perfectly, you should read it with a very different flow and intuition. This is a certificate of compilation that is awarded to, questo è un certificato di compilazione che è stato affrontato e presentato a signorina Ioana Todorova. Ioana Todorova ha ricevuto questo certificato grazie al fatto che ha compilato con successo l'istruzione della Jefferson County per you read this with this very pleasant way of rendering the session, and usually this is the fourth thing that is evaluated in the site translation, if it's listenable, if it's something that can be, I don't want to say pleasant, but yes, you have to be pleasant in a way when you do that. And you have to exercise to do those site translation speaking. The way I just did this one, I did it in Italian, obviously. that was a certificate, so it's kind of hard for me to sight translate it, but I'm just giving you example so you understand that the flow is this motion of narrowing, motion of something. An exercise that can help you to do this is to read half a page of a different text every day, like the way I speak right now. You can open a book, a newspaper, and read a few paragraphs in English. And most of the times I did have to, I think I did 5 or maybe I did 6. I did sight translation tests, and most of the times they were from English to the target language, but several times from target language to English, apology. Normally they're in, let's say, in Spanish, and you gotta do it in English. And I was exercising a lot to do that. And then when I went to the test, I had the English text and I had to do it in, I think it was in Russian. And this is when I bumped. So I advise you to exercise both ways. You can have consent form in the target language and do it in English, and vice versa to exercise for your sight translation practices. I think that was my training for you guys. That's my suggestions to how to get ready for your medical interpreting sight translations. Thank you guys for being here, and I hope you have a good day. Bye bye.